So for those who don't know, which I would imagine half the crowd or 90% of the crowd does not know who I am. My name is Swale Nunez, and I head up B2B developer relations for Samsung. Something I take pride in because I'm an advocate for developer. As a developer myself, I do whatever I can to push for them. Today is a little different though, because we have developers that span the individual developers that we interact with, but then we have this amazing opportunity to interact with companies and partners who are doing amazing things in the B2B space. So I'm happy to be a part of this panel. And I think the light is shining bright on these guys, and I'm being outglowed, if that's even a thing. But before we introduce the amazing panelists, I want to kind of get an idea of like who's in the audience from any enterprise developers in the audience. There we go. Just from a show of hands, from a technology perspective, anybody involved in technology within their respective enterprises? Okay. Now, as a part of that, are you aware of any, or are you kind of privy to the challenges that your individual enterprises face by a show of hands? We are. Samsung is known for its hardware, and what we've realized is a lot of these challenges that come that happen within the enterprise is based on the limitations that exist from a hardware perspective. And so we did what we could, or what we're actively doing what we can to build devices that help kind of solve those problems, right? So we've identified and we've incorporated user experience, sleek design, innovative and intuitive design of our hardware, and kind of figuring out what the needs are for our enterprise customers and attempting to solve that. So with that said, I'll now shift the spotlight to the guys to the left of me, and I'll give them each an opportunity to introduce themselves, who you are and who you what company you represent, and we can start off with you.
Hey everyone, my name is Greg Albrecht. I'm the CTO and co-founder of Orion Labs.
Hi, I'm Charlie Nigoy. I'm the VP of Business Development for LibreStream.
Hi, I'm Eric Stillman. I'm product manager at VMware, working on the Workspace ONE platform.
Todd Kamenetsky, Director of Partnerships for Rapid Deploy.
Thank you. So let's give our panelists a round of applause. So as you can tell, there's a mix or a range of companies from small to large. But what is common across the panel is this idea of workforce enablement. And I think it'll be good to start off with that as our introduction to this panel. And I'd toss it over to you, Eric. What does workforce enablement mean to you and your organization?
Yeah, thank you, Swale. Yeah, so for me, workforce enablement really is closing the gap between IT and then the end users, where IT isn't just somebody sitting in the basement of your office, like replacing broken hard drives. They're actually transforming the way that end users access their work applications and their experience of just doing their job, where now an end user can take their own personal device and just easily and securely access all of the applications that they need to, while maintaining enough security that there's no risk for the organization to lose any data. And then the employee has the flexibility of working when they want, how they want, and on any device. So it's really empowering IT and delivering this seamless experience for the end user. And it's not just providing that the work experience, it's the entire life cycle of that employee's device, from simplified onboarding of new employees, easily giving them access to the work applications that they need, to the life cycle of that device, and then the end of the life cycle as well. Removing corporate data to avoid any security breaches.
Oh, I appreciate that. So, continuing with that theme, Todd, you and the Rapid Deploy team are doing some exciting things, right? And it's about, again, extending that workforce enablement, and the focus is leveraging our devices to help our first responders, right? Can you speak to that? What is DEX? So for those who are unfamiliar, DEX is a Samsung solution that extends Android to a desktop-like experience, right? So it gives you that the desktop experience that you know and love from using on your PC. You can now access that via your mobile device. So sure.
So Rapid Deploy is, as Wally said, is first responder software. So we do 911 software, but then that extends into police, fire, and EMS. So the mobile and the in-vehicle experience for those first responders comes through our application. DEX has provided us, it's changing the conversation. So to date, police, fire, and EMS, they've got a tough book that's kind of mounted, somehow in there, and they can't really get it out, and it travels with the vehicle. And traditionally, mobile devices end up with leadership. So the chief has one, and some of the leadership has one, but they're just not widely distributed to rank and file. The question of how to manage that. And so the DEX platform is provided a really interesting use case and a really interesting way to enable first responders. So now they have one device in the law enforcement more than fire and EMS. The security aspects are quite significant. So being able to make sure that your data is secured in the vehicle, and now they're saying, well, we're taking it with us. There's less risk. We're not leaving it in a vehicle overnight. We're not leaving it when we leave a scene. We don't have to make sure the vehicle is locked. We can just grab and run. And so now that opens up this whole additional set of possibilities where we're now talking about what else could we bring along if every officer or every first responder had these tool sets. Everything from simply being able to take photo evidence and video to having real-time chats with medical personnel because the scene that they're looking at is more extensive than what they've had. So workforce enablement in first responder spaces, this is completely changing the potential, and it's really changing the conversation with the chiefs and the leadership as to what they can bring into the field.
Oh. So yesterday, as I was walking down the hall, I saw Greg, and he had his backpack on with his little, what is it called?
Radio.
Oh, it's a radio. With his radio on. And I've always been fascinated by that, the field service. And you also, Orion, building solutions for field services, but you take a more preventative approach, right? So safety being important. Can you talk about how you, and you leverage multiple Samsung devices within your solution itself. Can you talk about what that relationship was like and speak to some of the devices or how you're incorporating Samsung devices into your solution?
Yeah, for sure. So we want to be able to enable the responder or the person working out in the field, right? People who are out in the world getting things done, to get things done with the information they need through whatever mechanism is most effective for them. So if it's a user using a Samsung tablet to access our application or our dispatch interface, they can use that. If it's a Tizen Watch app, they're able to access it that way. Our primary interface for Orion is through voice. We like to enable heads up, eyes up, voice-enabled workflows. So for users who are out in the world who can't use their hands, right, or can't look down at a screen, how can we enable them to be more effective just using their voice? Traditionally, you would see this through radios, right? And if you look out at a lot of the security staff here and the event staff here, they're all walking around with radios, right? Those radios are really only talking from person to person. We look at that and say, well, how can we act as a force multiplier on that communications channel? And what do Samsung devices allow us to do on those devices, right? Indoor location awareness, real-time language processing, sensors reading into our platform. What are the capabilities that we can begin to leverage and make you more effective, safer, faster, better?
Yeah, no, that's good. So I think as I was kind of going over the list of panelists, Charlie, what Liverstream is doing is unique to me. And the reason why I say that is because you're leveraging AR technology. And traditionally, that's felt like a consumer play, right? And as I interact a lot with our enterprise customers, and they've had difficulties trying to find ways to take AR and make it useful for the enterprise, right? And you guys found that way, and not only have you found that way, you're innovating along that process. So can you speak to that?
Sure, absolutely. And our focus is really the 2.7 billion deskless workers in the world.
Yeah.
And a lot like what Greg and Todd mentioned, these are people that are not in the carpeted spaces. They're not in the offices of the world. They're on the factory floor. They're in the oil field. They're in rugged environments where work gets done. And what we are doing is bringing them capabilities, knowledge, information, access, et cetera, that frankly we probably take for granted a little bit in the carpeted spaces of the world. When it comes to AR, by the way, AR's got a zillion different definitions. We really look at that with a focus on the word augment. And most people who said AR, they're going to envision kind of Pokemon Go visual stuff, cartoon, even if it's industrial, it's usually like a screwdriver removing a panel or something like that. But we're not just visual creatures, right? We're not just augmenting what you see. We want to augment your knowledge. We want to augment your ability to sense things, perhaps in a different wavelength than we see, all with the goal of making safer, better, faster workers out of that. Yeah. So AR is anything that brings capabilities to those deskless workers that they would not otherwise have.
Now, I guess across the board, there's this emphasis on safety, and for obvious reasons. As you're building these solutions, and there's always this concern that as you advance technology, especially in enterprise, at some point you can compromise the idea of safety. Can you individually speak on what kind of considerations you take as you're developing these solutions, and how is that at the top of your mind, and how do you kind of go back to that to make sure that you are, as much as you're pushing technology, you're still keeping in mind that you have to protect the individuals who these applications are being deployed to?
I would say we start out by asking one question at a time. We don't go in with a panacea saying that our solution will solve every problem, but what is the primary factor in injuries at your workplace? Is it people, trucks running over your foot? Cool. Well, what is the question we need to begin asking to make sure that doesn't happen again? Yeah. Right? Is it that the operator isn't trained correctly, or is it that they didn't do their in-service correctly? Is it they didn't check out the vehicle beforehand? Cool. We can build a workflow to ensure that they're doing that before they can operate that vehicle, or to make sure that their surroundings are aware that vehicle is moving. All of that data is there. All of that connectivity is there. You just have to start answering the questions and build the pipelines answering those questions.
Anybody else want to?
Greg said it awesomely in his last comment about heads up, eyes up. We do a lot of work in oil and gas. We do a lot of work in mining and in energy. These are industries where they're very dangerous for a whole, there's a lot of different ways to have a very serious accident in those types of environments. And safety gets top of the list when you're engaging with these kind of customers. Having the ability to be able to be aware of your surroundings, not having any occluded vision, not looking down at something, not being distracted, is absolutely crucial. As well as fundamentally some of the technology you have to have if you go into an explosive environment. There are things you can bring in there, and there's things you can't bring in there. And having specific rules and guidelines around that is an important part of keeping people safe.
So, as you're building out these solutions, obviously what you wanted to accomplish. You have a vision, and you understand, hey, this is the solution I want to put together, and I know what it takes to execute on that. And I think knowing that, and then you tap Samsung to say, you decide, all right, how can I see this to fruition, right? Then you have to put the partners in place to help bring this all together. So my question is, why Samsung? What about Samsung specifically made this partnership work? And I'll start off with you, Eric, and then you kind of speak to that.
Yeah, so Samsung has been able to provide all the tools that we need to build any kind of experience it doesn't matter what the end user is. If they're a knowledge worker, if they're, even rugged device cases, bring your own device to work, or you get assigned a device. Maybe it's for like a shift worker, a shared device. And Samsung has been able to build all of the tools that we integrate with. What a good example is a case where somebody is using a device at a financial or government institution, and these devices have to be at the highest level of security. And Samsung's Knox platform has been able to provide a level of security that's accepted by government institutions globally. So that's just a testament to the deep level of security on these devices. And we've been able to build an experience around that where an employee can get a device, and right out of the box, it enrolls into device management using Knox Mobile Enrollment. After that, we can provision, VMware has a launcher application that essentially locks the device down to only the apps that the end user needs to do their job. And so they have this mobile experience with the launcher application. Then they can connect the device to Samsung DeX and have a completely different experience and a completely different configuration of applications that they have access to. And so this DeX experience is actually end user facing, where they have their device using their work apps, then they connect it to DeX, and they have a shared screen where they can actually show a client or a customer totally different things. And we're able to utilize the Knox Service plugin to actually configure the DeX experience, to configure the security on the device, to control different settings and apps that the end user has access to. And even further than that, the end of the device life cycle, we're able to completely wipe that device remotely, in case that device gets stolen or maybe it's getting refreshed. We just have this entire life cycle now that we're able to manage using the tools that Samsung's built.
So Todd, I know you're the partnerships guy, and I would imagine that you work with multiple different partners, right? And as with anyone or anything, there's always these idiosyncrasies, right? Can you speak to what the relationship is like between you and Samsung, and how does it compare, and is it what's working? Just kind of speak to it in more detail.
Yes, and the relationship with Samsung goes back from the very beginning of Rapid Deploy. But it's interesting because I was asked to come and speak here at this group, and I said, well, I'm the least qualified developer here, so this is going to be an awkward conversation. And then it was really about the business case that's being brought forward, and it's a completely different discussion. Our solution is designed to work across almost every environment. It's designed to work on tablets, on PCs, on old computers, our in-vehicle experience is essentially all web-based, cloud-based browser experience. So the hardware, in this case, didn't provide us a ton of unique capabilities, but DeX did. DeX changed the conversation we were able to bring to law enforcement. So from that perspective, it's a very unique relationship that no one else is bringing to the market. And so we're really excited to be able to have that conversation. As a partner guy, I deal with lots of different people, and Greg's one of our partners on the Push to Talk and trying to figure out how to enable all that. But there was a question earlier about how do we think about bringing stuff to partners? And in my world, it's pretty self-limiting. Try to explain to a chief you're going to have this amazing experience doing these things. I don't need it. Unless it actually reduces risk, saves lives, I don't have the budget and I don't have the time to play with it. So for me, it gets cut down really, really fast is what I can do. Some of the AR stuff is really interesting. Like if a firefighter could see where the gas line is in real time, that's really powerful. So I'm kind of the steward for this relationship with law enforcement, trying to find all these different experiences and bring them in. And we find ourselves in this position where they're asking us what can be done. They're asking us what's possible. And so being able to say, here's this, take a mobile phone to work day. And they're like, we don't use mobile phones here. And I was like, well, you can. Yeah. There's a way to do this. The Samsung platform allows us to do it, where they think of, somebody has a phone and they just carry it around and they use Google Maps for it. And we're like, no, we cover that in the app. This is about the hardware platform to change what the officers do.
Yeah, definitely. And you have a similar type experience, Charlie, on the business development side, right? Can you speak to that any?
I mean, for us, what Samsung's bringing to the table is really two things.
Okay.
Ruggedness, because again, our customers are in the dirt, more or less, and capability. So we talk about physically rugged environments, but we also have what we call network rugged environments. So for example, an offshore oil rig in the North Sea, it's getting better connectivity, but when we first started, our customers only had 56K dial-up over satellite, which is incredibly small, and they wouldn't give it all of it to us, right? They could, you have a slice of this. So, high latency, low connectivity, so very rugged, if you will, network environment. We engineered our platform to be able to perform in those environments, but it only can go so far. When you start bringing additional capabilities of AI, of natural language processing, the lack of connectivity in some of those environments makes that challenging. So the other thing that Samsung is bringing to the table is more capability, right? More power in the edge device allows a lot more of that work to be done locally. And let's not forget, these are mobile workers. That device may be the only constant in their life. They may get a different truck every day, but that device is essentially their entire work world. So when they get increasing capabilities, I don't know if I can even say this because it's, I guess, getting announced tomorrow, but it rhymes with Tab Active Pro. That kind of thing is making that office, if you will, much more powerful.
Yeah. So taking the conversation a little bit deeper, right? And this idea about rugged devices and being in this environment, what we realize is, especially for enterprise developers, a lot of the times they're building for solutions or for problems that they themselves they don't necessarily experience, right? So they're in the back offices and they're just writing code. You're a little bit unique, right? Because you're an EMT and you are actively out there, but then you still wear the CTO role, right? So talk about that, the duality that exists in that regard, and then what is that transition like? And is it two separate hats? Do you kind of bring them together?
Yeah, it's kind of fun being able to scratch my own itch. Yeah. The company itself was sort of informed by my background in public safety as well as my background in sort of big data analytics. And I wanted to make myself more effective when I actually get to perform as an operator. And one of the, I'll give an example. One of the early use cases was, it's really great that I can call the language line when I have a patient that doesn't speak English, but I already have this voice communications capabilities. Couldn't I just use this to speak to this patient? So that's when we started down the path of adding AI and NLU to our platform, and we enabled a translation mechanism. So now I can communicate with the person in front of me using their native language, and I can communicate in my native language, all using the same platform. So again, that wouldn't have been possible if I weren't actually out in the field downrange interacting with people in the world. And I think that's really important. It's really easy to build stuff in a vacuum and say, well, no, people are totally going to use this. But unless you actually go out and use this, you don't know what that experience is. And it sounds a bit cavalier to say that, but you really have to get out in the dirt to understand how people are going to use these things, right? I can imagine there's a bunch of capabilities that are built into my phone that I don't touch, and I'm sure somewhere someone uses them, but there's a million other capabilities I do use. So really having that gallery of capabilities in a device is what enables us to go out and build these applications and these platforms.
Yeah. So let's speak on the experience side of this. As enterprise developers, when we build application, one of the things we must consider is user experience, right? And it directly impacts the rate of adoption, right? So from an experience perspective, what is the feedback you're getting back? I mean, you each have, you're leveraging existing technology and using Samsung devices, but when these individuals are out doing their respective jobs, they don't want to be hindered by technology or the technology you introduce, right? It's supposed to enhance the experience, so the focus is on actually what they're there to do, right? Can you talk about the feedback, what you're getting from your customers, your users? It's open to the...
Yeah, I mean, in any technology deployment, the challenge is never technical. Yeah. It's behavioral. Yeah. I mean, we're humans. We're creatures of habit. We order the same kind of coffee at Starbucks every day. So any kind of implementation of something new from a technology standpoint always lives or dies on the adoption side of things. I think you said it best, the friction is the enemy. Everything you can do to reduce friction is going to be key. So if that is a device that is familiar to them because they use it every day in their personal life, and Todd, you have the experience of saying, it's probably odd for some of the from the first responders saying, I use my personal phone all the time, and now I have to use this ruggedized, tough book, and I'm like going backwards.
Yeah, and it speaks to literally mobile being dragged into first responder space. I don't know how many EMS and fire people, they whip out their personal phone to get directions to a scene. I'm like, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. They're like, yeah, but it works better than what I have available to me. And so here's a secure or safety personnel using an unsecured, unsafe device, and it's like this whole juxtaposition between how do we drag those people's experience and find tools they really need. And you're absolutely right, like finding the behavior that helps them. And the second it doesn't work, the first thing they're out the window, literally, physically out the window.
Yeah.
In emergency situations, for me, as I said, it's all self-limiting. Tech that doesn't work doesn't get used at all.
Yeah. There's the axiom, right? Like, what is the best camera? The one you have on you. So we look at it the same way, right? What is the best radio? The one you have on you.
Right.
And then, when we go to these agencies, there's the adoption or how we're going to get people to use it. I'm like, what is the chief using? And they're like, oh yeah, he's got a smartphone. I'm like, chief's already doing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of the times these workers they go back to what they're used to, right? So the application they know and love and they're familiar with. And I know Eric with VMware, we give them access to that, right? So we don't take that away. We just create an alternate channel. Can you speak to that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, Samsung is, because they're the leader in not only the consumer side, they're also the leader in the enterprise side, when it comes to Android. Yeah. And that just makes it so much easier for us to increase adoption on the customer side when, now they're able to continue using the device that they're familiar with. And, with that work and personal split on the device where, the work data, the personal data is totally separated, but the experience is the same on both sides. And when they're using an experience that they're familiar with, it just makes them that much more productive.
Yeah. So, as we're wrapping up here, at least from the panel side, I want to ask a question, and I'll give each one of you the opportunity to answer, right? So, in your respective fields, what you're trying to do with technology, can you give us a glimpse into the future of kind of nothing top secret that you can't share, but just how do you envision your particular space growing with technology and how, and then if you want to add how you can see Samsung impacting that, you can. But for this one, it's just to kind of purely talk about, let's talk about the future for a little. And especially innovating these your respective fields, right?
We had VCRs, and then we had DVD players, and then we had Blu-ray players, and now you don't have any of those. You have Netflix and Amazon and those types of things. So I see it less and less about being the physical aspect of it and more about what are the capabilities that you're going to have. How quickly, how easily can you answer that question when you need to ask the question? It's not going to matter. You don't need, we're not thinking about Blu-ray. We're not thinking about that I have a phone or a watch or a tablet. They all have access to the same data. Let's get to there, right? Let's get to that sort of panacea of being able to answer questions in real time and get you the data that you need in real time, regardless of the interface. And ultimately, one interface is going to be better than the other. Whatever's best for the environment that you're in.
Yeah.
Are we going down the
Yeah,
line?
we'll just go down the line.
So I mean, one thing that the future is going to look like, and it's pretty inevitable, is that globally we have a population distribution where it's kind of the equivalent of the baby boomers, as we call them in the States. There's a huge slug of population that is basically 55 and older. Yeah. And then there's a bit of a gap, and there's a pretty big chunk in the 20s. Every company that we work with has the common problem of that their most knowledgeable and experienced people are walking out the door for the last time. And that's occurring, at least in the United States, at a rate of about 10,000 people a day. And that's accelerating between now and 2026. So the number one challenge that every company that we work with has is how do we preserve that knowledge in a way that doesn't ever walk out the door? Because incidentally, if you give that 62-year-old person's job to a 22-year-old person, there's a good chance that 22-year-old person is not going to be there in 3 years either, because nobody stays at a company for 40 years anymore. I know you're working on 15, but so what we see is that a lot of that knowledge has to be embodied into a system that allows new workers to get up to speed faster and allows resiliency in the event of a worker departure, whether that's from retirement or for $2 more an hour down the road.
Yeah, and I'll just piggyback a little bit off what Greg said. It's really about getting the users the information and the data that they need as faster and faster, so that there's just less time for users sitting around waiting for something to load or figure out what the next thing that they need to do. So it's really about building an intelligent platform that is able to just assist end users, whether that's employee onboarding, whether that's accessing their applications, what have you. But it's really about just, all of this data and analytics just coming together to just provide a seamless experience for end users, to just get them, the data that they need to make sure that they can do their work in the easiest way and the fastest way possible.
So I have one of a great job, because this is all I do is sit there and think about what could we do. And we're in an industry, and I always joke because everyone knows what an airline traffic control screen looks like, and most dispatch systems kind of look like the same thing, and everyone's a little horrified when you see that, and they're like, that's what you use. And coming from a completely different approach and being all web-based and browser-based and this really cool experience, we can bring in this unlimited amount of data and contextual information for situational awareness, which is great. And then you think about, do you really want a pop-up saying, hey, did you want this? Hey, did you want? We have to, at the same time, limit all that information and find ways to make it highly relevant only when they need it. So, working with Ryan and Greg, we've been talking about, if the officer is running down the road, do they have to stop and find their radio and call in what's happening? Or could they just yell, help, I'm doing this, and have the AI automatically understand what they're doing, relay that to they're not calling in to see if a dispatcher's available, and then once they're available, telling them what they're doing while running down the street chasing someone. We now can use wearables to see, why is this person running in the middle of the day down the street, and why are they in this area? And so being able to have all that technology in the future really is about enabling an industry. My boss likes to say we're killing dinosaurs. And so it's an industry where it has been 2 years or 3 years to roll out a new map within the dispatch system, and we do it in a day, in minutes, right? So everything is about how do we make things more real-time, more contextual, and just change situational awareness. So all of these partners, as we've been talking, we're creating a job and a mission, because now we have all these law enforcement people running around with mobile devices, and support is going to be out with them. It's not, they're not going to all show up in a line in the back room and try to work on these devices, and how we bring AR into it and how we bring voice into it. It's all really interesting and relevant. We're just building those use cases and explaining how to safely make them happen, how to roll it out in a way that makes sense, ease into the experience, and bring people along. So,
and then I want to kind of end with this last question, and going back to the term use cases that you kind of just mentioned. So I always get asked this question: why develop for B2B instead of B2C, right? So from enterprise as opposed to consumer. And for me, my response is always, well, B2B gives me an opportunity to help save the world, right? You can do something meaningful, whether that's literally saving somebody or doing things inside the workspace that'll make somebody's life a little bit better, right? And you guys are all doing that across the board. And then by you telling me that what the future looks like means that there's passion exists, and not only that, you're championing something and you're going to continue to champion that, right? My question to you is this: why? Why B2B? Why this particular space? Why not go build the next, I'm not going to say a popular game because in case anybody works for that company in the audience, but why B2B? And obviously I could, just looking at and knowing what you do in EMT, I could guess what that is, but I don't want to make that assumption. So I'll ask, why?
We actually, it's funny you should put it that way. We flipped it and we started with B2C. And what that taught us was if you make it friendly and you make it viral, it's much more approachable for people, right? If you put it into a form factor that they're familiar with through their smartphone, they're familiar with consumer-oriented products. Start with that familiarity and that shine, that gloss, and then it makes it really easy for them to adopt it. The flip side of that, the sort of is paradoxical, is then you have to later on add all of those enterprise features. So it's really easy to say that you should front load all of the enterprise features, but that costs time and money, right? You're a developer, you know this, right? It's hard, but that's ultimately what will make your company, and not just make your company another app that people forget about, right? If you're actually going to solve problems, it's not the individual folks who are going to adopt it, it's the larger organization. So eventually you're going to have to take that leap. It just depends on when you're mature enough to do that as an organization. And it's hard. I won't say that it's easy.
Anybody else want to?
Yeah, the LibreStream origin story is exactly what Greg said a little bit ago. Solving a problem that the founders actually, they themselves had, and how do they project their expertise and knowledge, at this point was actually halfway across the world, to solve a problem rather than jumping on a plane. But beyond that, this is kind of the mercenary capitalist answer, but what we do is effectively a time machine. We're changing a day into an hour into a minute. And that is incredibly impactful from a financial standpoint if you're in an industry like oil and gas, like aviation, like heavy equipment manufacturing, where you're measuring minutes in hundreds of thousands of dollars of increments. I mean, I would love to find a bunch of consumers that have that kind of burn, but I haven't found them yet. So we're sticking with the business side.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, enterprise makes the world go round, right?
I like that. I like that.
There can't be any downtime. You know, it's a 24/7, 365 thing. And, you know, there's so many different types of companies out there, and any downtime for them, they could be losing millions of dollars a minute. So being able to solve those problems and, you know, make sure devices are always ready, you know, always connected, always available for, you know, the users to be able to do their jobs, and, you know, making sure that there's never a time where somebody is stuck and they can't do something. That's, you know, that's the worst fear probably for all of us. So that's why it's, you know, it's exciting to be able to deliver these types of solutions, you know, to just enable all of these customers to be able to do that stuff.
So me personally, it's interesting. I've worked in new technology companies for the last several years, and when I joined this one, I met the founder and met an incredibly passionate person. And 70% of the company is made up of some type of first responder, police, fire, EMS. So, I mean, I think they just, the guy they just hired put us at 250 years of public service experience in the small team based in the US, which is fairly significant. I didn't come from that background, but as you said, when I was asked, I can go do anything, what do I want to do? I want to do something that substantially moves the bar along. And so this has been, you know, for me, a very great experience to work with an incredible group of people that put their lives on the line far more frequently or more than I will ever do. So enabling that technology and following on the comments here, these are really hard problems. Like figuring out a new app is exciting and fun, and the traction associated with the consumer pickup is really exciting to some people. And then there's people that we've been able to recruit and retain because of the mission, because it's solving a really hard problem. And so the B2B aspect is where I've spent my entire life, and that's probably the reason I stay in B2B. But in this company specifically, B2B and the first responder space has been amazing.
No, this is great, and that's amazing. So thank you guys. With that, I wanted to open it up just to see if we have any questions, and we do. So we have a mic there, if you don't mind.
Just wondering if you have any comments. I come from out of the medical field, and so over my career dealt with more and more information coming at you, more quickly and being able to manage that. And we see problems of decision fatigue. And so, how do you see this in what you're doing, where you're providing more information more quickly?
I can speak to that as the medical person. I go back to the answering one question at a time aspect of it. It's really easy to lay out, here's all of the data that I have available, pick your poison, right? Pick your answer. But instead, it's meet you at the time of need. So, an example I'll use is there's this idea of diversion status. You can't just show up to a hospital with an ambulance. You have to know which hospitals have capacity. That's a call people make on the radio 300 times a day in San Francisco. It's just a database lookup, right? Like I can automate that workflow and get that information into your hands right when you need it. And until then, I'll stay out of your way. I can just sort of passively be there. And the extension of that is now I can start automating your PCR or your EMR using your voice. So I think I don't feel like I'm directly answering your question, but instead I'm trying to answer the individual user's questions at their time of need versus just inundating them with data. Hopefully that adds some clarity to my answer. I'm not sure if anyone else.
I'll throw in as well,
input
and
on
that is, again, I talk to lots and lots of partners, and there's a group that's doing some work, and in the back of the ambulance, they're enabling video chat. And so when the case is beyond the capabilities of a BLS or somebody in the rig, and they can literally pull a doctor in and say, here's what I'm experiencing, and they can look and see and talk with the patient in real time. And decision fatigue is a whole different problem, and part of what we're doing is trying to simplify so they have to make less decisions and make technology easier. But from the medical perspective specifically, technology is enabling some pretty cool capabilities where a doctor can literally be in 30 different ambulances now in real time, managing a bunch of cases while they're en route to the hospital. So those things have never existed before. So,
At least with video, in real time that wasn't happening. You had online medical control, but you didn't have video, right? You can show them the patient.
And also with all the work to record information and to show how people were treated and to have a documentation of how that patient interacted, all of that's becoming more and more prevalent. And so that's where that partner was leading me on a discussion. I've got to go find a use case for it now.
Yeah.
All right, I think we have time for one more question. Is there anybody else? Going once, going twice.
Oh, there you go.
There we go.
Was he a plant?
So just real quick, you guys all spoke a little bit to how utilizing Samsung devices benefited your solution. I'm wondering how the actual partnership with Samsung that I think all of you guys have benefited your companies.
We found champions within Samsung and just sort of continued down paths with them, right? You find one champion, they introduce you to another champion. I think that was the best thing. No one told us that ahead of time. We just sort of unlocked that way, and I'm not sure if that's how Samsung necessarily operates, but it certainly was an advantage for us, is finding people that understood our mission and could sort of, proselytize for us within the organization.
Certainly, credibility, obviously, is instant. Samsung gets a seat at everybody's table, and the ability to join that seat is incredibly powerful, especially for a relatively small company in comparison.
Yes, I've been partnering with Samsung since even before when I was at AirWatch, before VMware acquired them. And, Samsung were pioneers in the Android management space, filling all of these gaps that, Google didn't build into Android. And, over the years, Samsung's developed, thousands of management APIs that we've had the opportunity to partner and integrate with. And, without them, we wouldn't have been able to do all of these different solutions that we've been able to build.
I think certainly credibility and bringing a seat to the table has been very powerful. And I certainly want to echo as well the finding a champion. You know, when we are able to find someone that feels passionate about what we're doing, they connect us with other people that feel passionate. It is a small community that we work with compared with a large developer community for B2C products. So being able to connect with those people in Samsung has been very powerful. You know, for us, the partnership's all been around the hardware and the use case. And so it just brings something really good for us, so.
Yeah. So with that, I want to end with this. So even if I were to take off my Samsung uniform today, I want to say I appreciate each one of you for what you're doing within your respective organizations and championing for B2B. Because again, for me, it means that you're directly impacting how business is done. And you have a hand in changing lives and helping lives, right? Which is important to me as well as a lot of people, because as you're out saving the world, that could be my family member, it could be your family member, it could be everybody's family member. So with that, I do want to say I appreciate that and continue to fight the good fight. And I'm sure everybody in the audience feels or shares that sentiment. So thank you guys for taking the time out of your days to be here, and we appreciate it.